Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, Ronald Reagan's son, Michael Reagan, joins us to talk about the film Reagan, his father's legacy, his faith, and so much more. Here is Michael Reagan. Michael Reagan, appreciate you taking the time and joining us today. I want to start with misconceptions. Is there something, and maybe there's more than one thing you would say, that people get wrong about your father, Ronald Reagan?
I think what they get wrong is he is exactly who you think he is. You know, I tell young kids to go out to the ranch, and I just talked to 160 high school students a couple of weeks ago at Young America's Foundation at the Ranch Center. And I said, when you go to the ranch and you go walk into that house and you open the door, you're going to say to yourself, oh my God, everything I thought about Ronald Reagan, I was right. He is humble. He is that guy I see on TV. He's not the guy they try to pretend he is. He's actually that guy. And that's what's great about him, because my father was the same with you as he was with me. The sense of humor, all of it, the storytelling, great way to grow up.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And, you know, I look at his legacy, and obviously very few presidents have had the legacy that he has had, especially in the modern era. You know, you recently had a chance to watch this film, Reagan, be made about your father, and Dennis Quaid plays him, and we'll talk through some of that. What was it like to see your dad, somebody you knew, you loved, somebody the world knew and loved, be depicted in a film? I mean, what was that experience like for you?
It was great because they got it right. I mean, I've known Mark and all of them for 19, 20 years. It took a long time for him to get this done. And so he used to ask me about stories. They refer to me at the library as the prequel, because they say, we have so many stories, but you seem to have a backstory to the story. And Mark knew that too. So many of the stories I had told him over the years, he was able to get into the movie and to be able to see those come alive in the movie, as my dad told me, or as Mikhail Gorbachev told me. But even better, it was great for my son Cameron and his wife, my daughter Ashley and her husband, to be able to go see the movie and be there at the premiere and see basically the stories I've told them, and to see their grandfather come alive on screen and get it correctly.
And so you felt Dennis Quaid had it correct too, because that's a big thing for somebody to come in and walk into that and have to bring that person to life. That's a lot of pressure. You felt like he had it?
He had a lot of pressure, and Dennis afterwards, he was sitting behind me at the premiere here in Los Angeles and Hollywood. It was kind of interesting because you're at the Chinese theater, and my mother has her handprints and footprints at the Grandma's Chinese from 1952 film. We took a picture out there with Dennis afterwards, but Dennis afterwards, you know, came over and thanked me. He says, thank you for sharing. Thank you for us talking 5 years ago when I was meeting with him and telling him about my dad, trying to get a feel of who he was. And I thought he did a great job in doing it. And I just like the way they depicted everybody. The most problem people seem to have was with my mother. Is it okay the way they treated your mother? I said, yeah, except she wasn't that heavy. Other than that, you treated her just correctly, because she didn't like politics. She never did like politics. She voted for him twice, but she didn't like politics. And Dad knew it, and she knew it, and the world knew it. And so they depicted my mom correctly.
You know, what would your dad say? Because again, everybody goes back to Reagan, right? He's the litmus test for conservatives. If your dad could see our politics today, where we are as a country, obviously there was a big election last week. What would he say? What would his position be on, not just on where we are, on who we just elected? What would he say?
Democracy got it right. I mean, that's what he would say. It's about democracy. You may not agree with the person who's elected. I didn't agree with Biden. I wouldn't vote for Harris. I may not agree, but it doesn't mean that I think democracy was thrown in the waste paper basket because my person wasn't elected president of the United States. And that seems to be where we're going today. And that's really sad. I think he would applaud what happened on Tuesday. He wouldn't tell you who he voted for. I would think I would know who he voted for because he told me always support the nominee of the party. Uh, but again, he would say democracy won, and it really did.
Yeah. Well, how did your dad's faith, let's talk about that. How did his faith influence his leadership? And tell us a little bit about his faith, because I think too often we don't get a chance to know sort of the inner workings of people like Reagan, who were so influential to our country.
Really fun story. I lived with him for a while when I was in high school, Loyola High School, and used to get up every Sunday and get Patty and Ron and Nancy ready to go to Bel Air Press. And I went to him one time. I said, Dad, you never asked me to go to church with you on Sunday. He said, your mother raised you Catholic, and I didn't want to upset her. So there you go. But my dad was very religious. I mean, it shows it in the movie, and they got that right in the movie from the earliest stages of his life. But I'll tell you something else. On Good Friday, 1988, I'm flying with my dad back from Washington, D.C. to California for Easter. As we land at Point Mugu, he counts out number 9 on his fingers. I said, what's important about that? 9 more months from now, I no longer will be president. You looking forward to it? He says, yes. I said, why? He says, March 30th, 1981, I remember looking out the window of my limousine and seeing people laying in their blood with bullets that were meant for me. And he said, I haven't gone to church if at all on a regular basis because my fear of putting people in harm's way because people are after me. Wow. So once again, I'm looking to no longer becoming president so I can visit with my Lord and Savior every Sunday from now on after I got out of office. And when he got out of office, he never missed church until Alzheimer's really kicked in. And then the minister would go minister to him at the house. And the minister would always say, I went to minister to a president, and the president ministered to me.
Wow. When you look at the issues, because being such a devout Christian for him, and then looking at the issues that we have going on right now, I would imagine in some ways he might not even recognize some of these things that we're fighting about culturally, right? I mean, some of these things are, you have the gender issue, you have obviously abortion's been a fight that's gone on, and he presided over some of that fight. We've seen that fight, but the way that it's shifted, what would he think about some of the social issues as they currently stand and the ways in which they're being handled by the parties?
But it's interesting because he talked about these. I mean, he really could see into the future what was going on. He did a radio show on boys and girls sports years ago when he was doing his 5-minute radio shows. He was talking about that issue and talked about one school that had a boy that entered a girls volleyball game or whatever. And he talked about these issues. And so if you really look back at him, he really could look in the future and see it. What do you say about losing, your freedom? You're one generation away from losing your freedom. Well, ask the Ukraine how that works out. Ask anybody. We do lose our freedom very quickly if we don't pay attention to it. The great thing about my father, which we need to learn, is he was a storyteller, and he was someone who really knew history and studied history. And today we don't study history. We try to solve problems, but we're not willing to go back and find out where the problem started. Because if you don't know where it started, it's going to be hard to fix it on the other end of the equation. But he would probably look out and say that old line. He said, there they go again. Listen to his speeches, listen to him. And I told some of those running for president this last year, what do you think the difference is between us and your father? I said, simple. Listen to my father's speeches. You felt Ronald Reagan's speeches. I only hear yours. I remember what I feel, but I'll never remember what I hear.
Wow. And that's probably what made him so transformational, right? I mean, people remember him. It's like people remember every president, but there's something about Reagan that stands out. And so when you think about this film, what are you hoping people in seeing him in that light take away from it?
Well, I think they're all taking a lot away from it. I would like to see, it's a history lesson. It really is a history lesson of Ronald Reagan fighting communism from the early days of Hollywood to the end of the day. But take away from it, here's one thing to take away from it. I think it's a seminal moment in the movie. He is shot. He's in the hospital. He wakes up in the hospital. Who is sitting in a chair with a rosary, praying for my father and with my father? Tip O'Neill. Would that happen today? Would that happen today in the America we live in? And the answer might be, no, it wouldn't happen today. I think that's something you could take out of this movie and say, that's the way it was. That's the way people used to be, even though they disagree on a regular basis. Here was the man, Tip O'Neill, the Catholic, Ronald Reagan, the Protestant, and Tip O'Neill sitting in a chair with a rosary praying for the President of the United States who had been shot.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible. And that's the kind of thing we need to see right now. I mean, even this past week, watching it, and longer than that, watching the division, the hatred, the anger, there's a level of disagreement and frustration if you lose an election that's going to exist. But to this level of disowning family, there's a lot going on right now. And so that what you just described is what this country needs right now, is it not?
It really is. Another lesson you get from Ronald Reagan. A lot of people talk about my dad's, oh, Ronald Reagan this, Ronald Reagan that. What have you learned from him? And one of the lessons you can learn is we're coming up on Thanksgiving. He had two children, Patty and Ron, who disagreed with him politically. If they voted at all, voted against him. Patty was a peace and freedom person. Ron, atheist. So you had differences of religion or no religion. You had differences of opinion. Patty led a march on Washington, D.C., you might remember, when he was president of the United States. But you know something? At Thanksgiving dinner, they were still at the table having Thanksgiving dinner. If Ronald Reagan could have two children who were so opposed to him, they would lead marches on Washington, not become Christians, vote against him or not vote at all, and they were still at the table for Thanksgiving dinner, we can learn a lot from that and say, you know something, I'm going to be more like Ronald Reagan. And those people I've been disagreeing with, I'm going to have at the dinner table on Thanksgiving Day. Start healing the country the way Ronald Reagan would have healed it.
That is really powerful to hear you say that. I've often wondered about your family dynamics. I think a lot of people do, right? You have different viewpoints, right? Your siblings and you, there are different viewpoints. And your father, as you mentioned, to have his daughter lead a march while he's president and even potentially purportedly voting against him, that's a tough thing. But if he can get over that, I think we can all get over our votes, being different with our family members, right?
Absolutely right. Even Nancy got over it. And she was the toughest one in the family to get over anything. And there they were at the table. My dad one time, at dinner, reached out and grabbed my hand because I was always sitting on one side of him, grabbed my hand, says, my only prayer is that before he passes, I hope my son Ron, like you and I, become a Christian. And that was his prayer. So he was always in prayer for our family and never just threw them out the door because they disagreed on anything. If anything, he enjoyed the camaraderie and the battle back and forth, if you will. But again, they were at the table on Thanksgiving Day.
That is an amazing lesson for us as we enter into this holiday season. As far as the film Reagan goes, where can people go to learn more, to purchase copies of the film?
It's now, you could go Amazon now, it's streaming. I think it just came out in Blu-ray, and all the other things just launched the last couple of days. So you go Amazon, streams online, and you can get it there. You can buy it, rent it, but take your whole family and learn a lesson and what have you. It's interesting that the critics, 17% of the critics hated it, or loved it, whatever. And 98% of people go see it, love the movie. And it's the biopic's correct. And the players in it are correct. And the stories are correct. And the way that Mark got into it, the old KGB guy going to tell the young guy what happened with the Crusaders. Go buy the book, The Crusader. It's a great book, and what have you. But again, teach history. My dad taught me history of the country. Sitting in the right front seat of the station wagon on Saturday mornings, taking me out to the ranch. He taught me the history, sang me Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard songs. That's what he did. Don't expect someone else to teach your child the history of the country. You teach your child the history of the country and the correct history.
And this sounds like a film that can help do just that. Appreciate you joining us today, breaking it all down and sharing some of those really personal stories. Really incredible. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thank you.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.